Welcome to the Middle Tech Podcast, this region's leading business podcast shining a light on technology, entrepreneurship, and the future of business in Kentucky and beyond. Our goal is to advance the ecosystem by bringing attention to the founders, changemakers, innovators, and those supporting them. Middle Tech's content can be found on your favorite podcast streaming app, social channels, and YouTube. We encourage you to follow and participate in the conversation. Let's discuss and build the future. All right, guys, welcome back to season 4 of the Middle Tech Podcast here. You've got Logan Jones and Evan Knowles recording out of the Awesome Inc. studio. And we just recorded an awesome episode with Colby Hall, who is the new Executive Director of an organization called SOAR. That stands for Shaping Our Appalachian Region. And this was a really cool episode because we got to dive into all the intricacies about bringing Eastern Kentucky up to speed in relation to the rest of the region, the rest of the country. And this is a topic we've discussed multiple times on our episodes with App Harvest and our episode with New Frontier. And, you know, Colby and I actually have a bit of a personal connection from back in college. I know his brother pretty well as well. And as soon as I saw that he was named Executive Director of SOAR, I knew that they had picked the perfect person to do that. And I think that'll be very clear in this episode as you hear him talk and you can hear the passion in his voice. And as Colby calls it, we're both sons of Eastern Kentucky. So they couldn't have picked a better person for this position. And it was an awesome conversation. You could just hear how much passion he has for what he's working on as he spoke.
Yeah. We talked about what SOAR is and the role that they're playing in the region, what Eastern Kentucky has historically struggled with. So they've struggled with a lot of things, particularly the decline of the coal industry. So we kind of covered that history, which is really important to understand. You know, context around what's going on there is important. It's not, fair to them to just cast judgment. You got to understand what's happened in the past and how they've gotten where they are and how they're going to get out of this. We talked about internet and the importance of that and why that's a major priority of Colby's. We talked about how to foster entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship is not something that you can foster quickly. It takes generations to foster, and so we talked a bit about that. We also finally, to wrap up the conversation, talked about where the region's heading. So what's he doing to take it into the future, and what that future looks like is what we talked about there. And I really thought Colby did a great job being an ambassador for the region. He spoke, very intelligently about what the history was because he's from there. He knows it very well. But he spoke very passionately about where it's heading, what his work actually is composed of.
Mm-hmm. And I'll give Colby a shout out on this as well. This is a genuine fan and listener of Middle Tech. He referenced several of our episodes and what he took away from those episodes during this conversation, which just made us feel really cool and important. So thank you, Colby, for that as you're listening to this. And we're going to go and dive into this. We think you guys are really going to enjoy it. All right, guys, so before we dive into these interviews, we just want to take a second to highlight our sponsors that are going to be sponsoring season 4 of the Middle Tech Podcast. So the first one we're going to go over is Betterment Corporation. So they're going to be sponsoring, like I said, all of season 4, and they're working hard to bring sustainable developments to Eastern Kentucky, places that need it so badly. What they're doing is taking old and abandoned coal mines and strip mines and putting sustainable businesses in their place that can help support those communities. So definitely go and check them out. Their website is landbetterment.com. They're doing some awesome things in this region.
Yeah. Next, we've got Brandon Johnson. So I've personally worked with Brandon Johnson. He is a lawyer and attorney that works with businesses, specifically startups in this region. He is from Kentucky. He's from Fordsville, Kentucky. He got his law degree from the University of Louisville. He's worked with Papa John's, Louisville Slugger, Instagram influencers that are making millions of dollars, real estate investors, you name it. But he loves what he does. He really loves helping small businesses, helping entrepreneurs get the right footing, because one of the most important parts of starting your business, if you're serious about it, is getting an attorney, making sure that all of your documents, incorporation documents, operating agreements, shareholder agreements, things of those nature are in check. And Brandon is there to help you with that. And again, I've worked with him and he does a great job. He makes it fun. He's very personable and I enjoyed working with him. So we appreciate him for sponsoring this season.
All right, go and dive into it. All right, guys, welcome back. We are sitting here with a good friend of mine, Colby Hall, the new Executive Director of SOAR, which stands for Shaping Our Appalachian Region. Colby, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, it's good to be here, Logan.
Yeah, this is one I've been really excited about. So we're actually in the same fraternity, had a lot of common connections throughout Kentucky and Lexington. And as soon as I saw your name pop up as Executive Director of SOAR, I was like, this is the guy. He's going to do it. So super excited to dive into this conversation and talk about your background and what you're hoping to accomplish at SOAR and what SOAR's mission is in the first place. Because I feel like a lot of our listeners may not even be aware of what SOAR's trying to accomplish. So we're really excited to dive into this and talk about where Kentucky's going into the future. So to start this conversation, let's just start with your background prior to SOAR, where you grew up, and then your educational background. We'll go from
there. Of course. Well, first, thanks for having me, Evan and Logan. It's really great to be here. I've been an avid listener, as I told you guys, and it's been awesome to see your kind of evolution from day one and getting into this great studio with all this pretty legitimate looking equipment here.
Fancy stuff.
It's big time, and obviously doing it in another Kentucky innovation hub like Awesome Inc. and which is what SOAR is for the eastern part of the state. So it's really good to be here, and I'm excited to talk with you today. So obviously my background, and too, Logan, you being a son of Eastern Kentucky as well. So I'm from Eastern Kentucky. I'm born and raised in Somerset and kind of grew up in the region, and so I've heard you guys talk about it, just the kind of the innate pride that people have born here. And I can't really put a finger on it. I've tried to explain it to other people, but you guys are, probably fortunate that you've gotten out and seen a bit of the world and traveled. And it's unique to us, man. I mean, I made that comment today. I mean, think of the area code 606. I mean, people really gather around. Yeah. And I can't think of another area code.
I know. Exactly.
About 606. I mean, yeah, and I mean, no disrespect to 270, but 606, that people rally around that, which I think is really cool. And so I think I bought into that. And so I, came up, I graduated, went to public school, graduated from UK. It's kind of one of those things, man, when you're from a small town in Kentucky and you do well in school, you kind of naturally, hey, go be a doctor, go be a lawyer. And there's nothing wrong with either of those professions. But I went to UK and kind of came across a serial entrepreneur, Nate Morris, who's in the Entrepreneur Hall of Fame. And he was kind of the first guy to open my eyes to a potential, new pathway that I hadn't thought about, as far as, kind of being in a startup, a technology startup, sales, something that have a history of it in my family. And a sales career could be a great springboard sales isn't everything, right? And so, after graduation, I spent a year teaching English in Spain, in Ibiza, Spain. Yeah.
In Ibiza.
Had no idea. But, listen, guys, I'm from Somerset. I'm from Somerset. So house music, all that stuff. And to top it off, when they sent me my assignment, it was spelled, because they don't technically Spanish or Castellano, what they call it over there, is the second language in Ibiza because it's Ibicenco, it's Catalan. Mm-hmm. So they sent me how they spell it in Catalan. I was like, where the heck is this place? So I put it in, and then I quickly saw where it was. You talk about a great year, though. I mean, it was such a...
Oh, sure.
And honestly had a lot of similarities. I mean, the Mediterranean Sea aside, to Somerset, and the fact of it was a small town.
Yeah.
Because it was this island that had a boom for 6 months out of the year for tourism, and then outside of that, kind of died down. And so I got a chance being in the schools teaching English, which that's funny because they're all used to British English over there, so I'm bringing Kentucky English over there, and I got a chance to really get ingrained with the community, and so I think I've got a lot of little kiddos over there running around with Kentucky shirts on and still keeping. And so
that's a cool story.
Dude, it was an awesome year.
Big house music fan now.
And not to be hyperbolic here, it really did kind of change my life because that type of positive
energy,
dude, it's life changing, man.
Yeah.
It's life changing, and it took me a little bit to get used to it over there, but
it's wild.
Dude,
I didn't get into it till I started going to some music festivals. I was listening to it here and there, but it was more of the pop EDM.
Yeah.
But once I started going to music festivals and got that feeling of being around 100,000 other people at the same time listening to it, that was when I really started getting into it.
Probably still am better now, but I'm just horrible dancer, very little rhythm.
Here.
But
you can move to it,
dude. And that's one of the lessons. I try to keep a blog over there. I had 3 posts, and I tried to. It was a way to practice, Spanish, but. Over there, dude, it doesn't matter. They don't pay attention to that. They just get out there and
you're
move
in your own
around.
zone.
Yeah, dude. And so
you're in your own zone.
It was awesome, and my friends made fun of me, but I got really into it, and I would love to one day. I mean, it takes such an art to
isn't that a dream?
Spin it
to just travel around and play
and have it on. I mean, and being the guy that can rock the aux cord, but also pull it out, and so So it was an incredible year, something I'll never forget, and made a lot of really awesome friends, and had a really chance to kind of be a cultural ambassador. And I don't mean that in a way that I'm the only guy that could represent, Kentucky or Eastern Kentucky. That's kind of what it felt like, because they never really dealt with.
They don't get many people from Kentucky over there.
Or America for that matter,
sure.
because it's kind of far away. And so that was a really cool experience. Pretty much their extended knowledge of Kentucky was KFC. And even then, a lot of people didn't have that because, KFC is branded as kind of taking the Kentucky out of it. It's just KFC. But, so I had a chance to obviously talk about our legacy industries like horse racing and bourbon's getting bigger over there. But even too, just the mountains. And, when again, that's a lesson too. When you talk about somebody without any preconceived notions or ideas or perceptions of Kentucky, and specifically Eastern Kentucky, somebody that's a blank slate, it's really easy to get them excited about where we're from.
Oh, I would do the same thing. I got to travel to Spain. Actually, just 2 summers ago now, doing some study abroad stuff, and we actually went to Ibiza. And anyone that I would meet abroad, I would always just talk about how awesome Kentucky was. It was so fun for me to talk about with no preconceived notions. I know we're going to get into this like stigma that it seems to have in America, but when you could talk to somebody that knew nothing about Kentucky, your heart gets racing. It's like something. And there's this quote that I want to try not to butcher here, and I forget who says it, but it essentially goes, everyone that I've met from Kentucky is either talking about going back or on their way back to Kentucky. And it's so true. Like when there's just something in the water here about loving this state so much. But let's talk a little bit about your professional career.
Absolutely. Well. Sorry, I might have went too far back, but I literally, we could talk about that for forever, but I got back and kind of reconnected with Nate and moved to Atlanta. It's kind of one of those moves though, to what the quote you just said, right? You're, knew long-term I wanted to be back, but unfortunately, and it's a problem we have, is sometimes that, you have to leave to go out and get the experiences and the knowledge and the development. And so I knew that's what I was looking for in Atlanta. And so I went down and worked at Rubicon Global, which is a startup in the waste space there. And that was kind of my first sales job. And then went to work for a company called Orderly, which was a SaaS company. It was an app for restaurants to help them kind of improve processes in the back of the house. And then my kind of my last stop before I came back to Kentucky was in the logistics world. It was a company called FLS Transportation, and had a chance to kind of come in there and kind of revamp their how they acquired customers, kind of their entire sales process, and moved them to more of a traditional kind of SaaS model where you have lead generation that feeds a group of salespeople that are focused on closing and segmentation and specialization. And so, but when this opportunity popped up, I just went all in on it. And so that happened in August, and I moved back beginning in November, and now I'm a Floyd County resident working in Pikeville, kind of traveling around Eastern Kentucky, man. So that's kind of where I am.
Nice. So that professional background, how did that prepare you for what you're doing now? You had mentioned, I imagine a lot of your job is sales.
Yeah.
So talk about what your past.
Yeah. Well, I think one, in this, just being from Eastern Kentucky, I mean, I think for the job that I'm doing, it takes somebody that has that natural passion and deep understanding for some of the big problems that we're trying to solve. So, I think it would have been difficult for me, even with the same background, if I couldn't say that I was a son of Eastern Kentucky or from here. I think that would have made me less qualified, because we just naturally understand kind of how it works. It's not to say that somebody from outside couldn't, but it's just, that was an important thing. But, I think in sales, right, what I like about sales is your performance is directly tied to the value that you create for your customers and all stakeholders. It's very white and black. It comes down to it. There's no excuses. You're given a number, you're expected to hit it. And it's how it is in the private sector overall. And so I think that experience, shows that as I take the helm of SOAR, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it, it needs to be very crystal clear who we are, what we do, and the value that we bring. We don't need to be a ceremonial organization. We need to be focused on driving real results. Leading the charge from a regional standpoint as an organization. And so to me, that's probably the biggest takeaway coming from a sales background. And two, I would say the important process. Process. You have to have a process and SOPs written out for everything that you do, or you're at risk of kind of losing yourself and losing focus, and everything ultimately has to tie back to the outcomes that you're hoping to drive. And so kind of start there and kind of work your way back. But, as I take hold of a team, I want to make sure I empower them with the right processes. That can change, right? But, I want all my team, every time they come in, to understand what's expected of them and how they're going to be evaluated and kind of what they're doing. And so, I would say, being very outcome-based, value-based, and process-oriented are probably the two biggest takeaways I could take from having a background in sales that's going to help me in my new role.
Nice.
Yep.
What about like right now made you want to take this role? I mean, were there thoughts of staying in Atlanta a little longer? Why right now, and why, No,
not really.
Yeah.
Listen, I loved Atlanta. Atlanta's
Yeah.
a great city, but my heart's here. I'm passionate about being from this state. I also think there's a massive opportunity in Appalachia, Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky. Obviously, the pandemic has brought challenges to everybody, but if anything, we're now in the same boat as everybody else trying to figure out what in the world to do with it. And we have so much natural beauty, natural assets to talk, but the people, man, the people of Appalachia, there's so much potential. I think about all the different things in the history, and Appalachia has such an amazing history as I've tried to read up on it as much as I can and being from there. And I would encourage anybody listening to go and to research just the history and the rich history of the ups and downs and the trials and tribulations. But largely we have a people that are extremely hard workers. Their ingenuity, their natural ability to, survive and move forward while still getting punched in the mouth. I mean, it's something a lot of areas don't have, but the way I see it, that standard, just surviving and getting by, is not good enough. And I think we have a great opportunity. It's a great place to be. It's the underdog. Yeah. And everybody wants to root for the underdog, and everybody wants the underdog to be successful. And so, we have a great opportunity as capital, as people are kind of moving away from some of these traditionally dominated areas on the coasts. And I've heard you guys talk about that theme a lot, the coast versus middle America. Mm-hmm. I think Eastern Kentucky is competitive on a lot of, so I saw the opportunity. Nice. And I wanted to be a part of it. And
awesome.
Here I am.
Perfect time. So let's move into SOAR. So let's start by just saying, what is SOAR?
Yeah.
And then we'll dive into the mission as well.
Well, SOAR stands for Shaping Our Appalachian Region, is what SOAR stands for. And so it was a special regional organization created in partnership in 2013 with current Congressman Hal Rogers in the 5th District, and then Governor Steve Beshear, who's Kentucky's governor's is Andy Beshear's dad. Mm-hmm. And so really the impetus behind starting it was the decline in the coal industry, specifically the thermal coal industry. And again, if you look at the history of the region, there's been natural ups and downs. The part that was unique, and I'll give you some numbers, just looking at Pike County, for example, I can tell you that from Q3 2011 to Q3 2020, there was about an 80% decline in coal employment in that specific county. It's a little higher as far as the amount of production of thermal coal. So it was this massive drop off in what had traditionally been the base employment for the region. Everything stemmed around, and not just coal, but the price of coal, right? Mm-hmm. And what made this bus different from the previous bus, as you look at the market, so a lot of market forces. There was some increased regulation from the federal government as far as emissions, specifically mercury emissions, but really it's the energy revolution that's happened in America since, not fracking, but really horizontal drilling, that's allowed America to be the swing producer for energy across the world. Natural gas became much more affordable. So there was no market play for coal anymore. It was much more expensive. And so it kind of left this massive void in Eastern Kentucky, and people were doing something about it, but there was no one regional organization to be the voice for rewriting the script for Eastern Kentucky and Appalachia, Kentucky. And so that's when SOAR was created. And the original working group focused around 7 kind of key areas, which we'll hit on, some on to today. But it was to be the one regional organization mandated for rewriting that script around what is the new normal? How do we create prosperity in Eastern Kentucky when coal is not part of the equation, if that makes sense, which is a big job. Yeah. But until then, it had been kind of everybody, focused on their county or their city doing it. There had been no mandated group looking at this group of 54 counties to say, what does the plan look like moving forward? And so that's why SOAR, that's who we are. That's why we were created. And that is what drives our work kind of each and every day.
Awesome. And you mentioned it there. It's called the blueprint of SOAR and what you guys are focusing on. So There's 7 of them, and I'm not sure we're going to have time to hit on all of them. I want to hit on the most important ones during this conversation. So I'm just going to kind of read through these 7 areas of focus, and then we're going to come back to the ones that we really want to hit on deep here. So going through these, it kind of starts off, and it seems like it kind of flows down through these. So starting off is internet access, so broadband. This is one we talked about a lot on Middle Tech. Tourism, the 21st century workforce, entrepreneurship, health, industry, and regional food systems. So all of those are focuses that, there's different companies and different initiatives that are doing some really awesome things around Kentucky right now. And we'll hit on as many of them as we can during this conversation. But let's start with the internet access and the broadband and getting that last mile and that connectivity that we were discussing a little bit before we started recording here. So what does it look like now? What's the current state of broadband in Kentucky, and where are we trying to get it to?
Well, there's a reason it's at the top of the blueprint, because pretty much everything falls underneath it, because everything depends on it. And it was important before the pandemic. It's hard to, other than life and death. And again, I'm not trying to over exaggerate it, but it's, if you can't get connected, you can't go to school.
It's like oxygen for business.
It really is. And, traditionally, and according to the FCC, and there's a lot of people that have talked about this, I think there's about 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 Americans in rural America, don't have access to high-speed internet. And by the FCC's definition, which the FCC only defines high-speed broadband as 25 megs down and 3 megs up, which isn't killer.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's so critical that we get it done. And I think the ultimate outcome that we want is, it's really easy to cherry pick areas where there's some population density, right? Because, one of the main problems with broadband is it takes heavy investment. There's a lot of upfront infrastructure that's required to get it done. Specifically, fiber to the home, fiber optic, which is the best. It's so far and above any other of our traditional hardwired. From like DSL copper wiring. Fiber optic cable gives you so much more. It's higher speeds and capacity, like bandwidth, but it's expensive. It's, a good way to estimate it is for every mile of fiber cable that you lay, it's about $50,000 to lay that fiber.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, do that math.
Crazy.
Do that math. And what makes rural areas really challenging, now if you lay in Lexington, you can make a business case for it, because you can lay a mile at $50,000. You may service 30 houses in a mile or more.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the case for rural Harlan County or rural Pike County or rural Johnson County. There may only be 6 people. So it's the pure economics sense of the word. And I know you guys probably took some business class. It's a market failure of why that void has been left there, because the private sector on its own, they
don't have an incentive to do it
ever. They answer to, they have stockholders they answer to, and it's not, they're now going to recoup that investment. And so the current state is we've got pretty good framework. There's a state project, the Kentucky Wire. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that, and it's been around for a little bit, and there's been investment. They've built out what's called the middle mile piece of the fiber optic. So it's a ring around the state. So there's a presence of Kentucky Wire in every state. And so I'm not an expert. I've kind of become a geek on it since I've started this, but essentially the internet, you start with kind of the internet itself connecting to this middle mile ring, which is kind of the backbone. The middle mile is built, but now we're at the last mile piece, which is to residential and businesses. It's also the most expensive piece, right? So, we've got people that are working on it. There's municipalities and counties that are trying to tackle this. We have large telecommunication providers, the AT&Ts, Inspections of the World in the area that are working on this. We also have a lot of really successful nonprofit cooperatives in the region that have taken the hold to make the investment to make it happen. And so kind of the current state of it is it's good in some areas, not great in others. Mm-hmm. But the end outcome has to be, blanketed coverage. And so our job in that is going to be to working with our partners, because, SOAR is at its core, it's not that we're out trying to do all this ourselves. Really, we're the clearinghouse for everything having to do with what's on our blueprint for Eastern Kentucky and Appalachian Kentucky. So we want to empower our ecosystem partners, the people that do the work, and make sure that the progress is made and to get the right people in the right room. And so, broadband's a perfect example of that. So we have all these people, kind of cooks in the kitchen. And I think our role is going to be trying to make sure everybody stays organized and focused on what their piece of the equation should be, and to try to get consensus around what that is. And so you guys will be on the lookout and make sure you guys can help us promote it. But kind of the very first step is mapping where broadband is currently. So broadband, from what I understand, is different in a lot of traditional utilities like gas lines or water lines, where you could go to the county government office and see where those are, or you've seen, it says call 811 before you dig for gas lines. Broadband is considered proprietary information, so you don't have to release where it is. So one of the hardest parts too, on top of the cost, has been not exactly knowing where it's needed most, both from where it doesn't exist today and where there's demand for it. And that's been a hard project, but we're close to get it mapped, and there should be some information coming out at the state level, hopefully to be able to do it in a way that's kind of directly through households and speed tests and things like that. And we're going to need help getting the word out to make sure we have the amount of responses from folks across the region to make the results statistically significant. So be on the lookout for that. So that's kind of step one. And then from there, it's going to be SOAR helping to kind of craft the plan and supporting our partners that are working on this issue, like local government leaders, the USDA, the Center for Rural Development, which is in Somerset and houses a lot of the physical fiber itself, Kentucky Wired, our telephone cooperatives, our rural electric cooperatives. I mean, it's going to take all of us to pull this off, but it's as important as anything. I'm serious, in my lifetime. I mean, if SOAR can be a part of this solution and say that we helped blanket Eastern Kentucky in high-speed broadband, it's as much of an impact as back when the TVA was founded and electricity spread into the rural. It's the same exact impact.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
So that's why it's at the top of that list.
Yeah,
and that's why it's pretty much what's been consuming me since I started.
One of the craziest parts of what you just said there is that we don't even know where broadband is running. That seems like trying to solve a problem. That's like trying to, I don't even sail on the ocean without a map. I don't know, like not even knowing where you're trying to solve the problem. That's a heavy task to be solving. And, just to emphasize the importance of it, and we're probably going to say several more times how important this is. The way I put it in this article I wrote was that the land of opportunity, it used to be, still is, America. You'd come to America, you'd come to a physical place. Now the land of opportunity is online. It's a virtual place. If you cannot get online, if you can't do online education, if you can't work remotely, if you can't just even go online and interact with other people all the way across the world. Some of the interactions that Evan and I have been able to have online, that is a huge opportunity for us and for us being in this area. It is literally, it's might as well be life and death at this point. If you're not able to have internet access, you're going to be sunk so far into poverty. And it's on an exponential curve. The further technology advances and the further the state progresses down that path, if you don't have the connection, you're screwed. Like it is.
Well, and it's terrible. Expensive, the upfront now, but the opportunity cost if you don't do it is way more expensive, even though you may not see that now. And so here's the thing, though. Everybody knows how important it is. It's not that we're making the case for why the investment needs to be made. Now the question is turned into how do we do it? And so we have a lot of great local government leaders, mayors, county judges that understand how important it is to their communities, because guess what? It's already in some communities. Jackson County, for example, Clay County has their gigabit cities. They have some of the fastest internet in the country. Think about that. In McKee, Kentucky, in Jackson County, Kentucky. And what it's able that community to do, from just getting people to move in there and work from home, but it's also changed and brought in remote work opportunities that it's hard to, we'll never understand what it means that, say a husband or a wife or a mom or a dad no longer have to travel and commute to a job that may pay, somewhere around minimum wage, and now they get to stay at home and work remotely, double their salary with benefits, and have a career growth. That is what broadband has allowed in communities through our partnership with Teleworks USA. And so, we already have people that have been successful that have given us the social proof that it can happen. So now it's trying to scale that and paint the picture in the couple of models of how it gets done, and kind of seeing it through. And SOAR has to be the organization that's continuing to stand out with a megaphone and kind of beat the drum of no, or it's too hard, it's too expensive. We've got to find a way. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, kind of where it is.
And this is what I kind of wrote the blog about. Maybe it's had some thought given to it, but it's a relatively new technology. Is there any consideration for using Starlink's system once that becomes online?
I figured you guys would ask me about that.
Be prepared.
So I think one of the cool things about Starlink, first off, of anybody thinking outside, anybody that's trying to solve this problem, especially the likes of Elon Musk, right, getting involved, all for it.
Yeah.
in the intro, if you think about Starlink and let yourself, think about best case scenario, a lot of that upfront cost is, well, yeah, getting the satellites in space, I'm sure is expensive, but it prevents you from having to lay the physical infrastructure, mm-hmm. right, which makes it such an attractive option. And so, I think there was a round of auctions. So the federal government does different ways to sell bandwidth and try to encourage investment in rural areas. And there was this round of, it's called RDOF, and I'm not exactly sure what that stands for, but they just divvied out towards the end of 2020 a big chunk of change, and Starlink was the biggest winner of that auction. I think they took home something like $885 million. Now, from what I've read and researched, it sounds like that the cost, that's a drop in the bucket for what it's going to take to get the 1,200 or 12,000 LEO satellites that they need up. But what it showed is that they learned how to play the game in DC as far as how to win in those auctions. Mm-hmm. That's been traditionally focused around the large tier 1 communication providers. I think that technology is still pretty nascent. I still think that, it's not even, I think it's active. Maybe they're beta testing it in some areas.
I haven't. Super rural.
Up in Canada or something.
Yeah, and I read in Great Britain too, and they've read some. They've ran some speed tests, and I think it's something. They've got 250 megs, that's mm-hmm. functional internet. Yep. Here's what I'd say: I don't think we have the time to wait until that's perfected.
For sure.
And making an investment in fiber to the home, that technology in itself, that's the best that we have. Mm-hmm. So Starlink can absolutely be a part of the equation. And the cool part about, you can never have too much broadband. If you look into it, you see what's super important to companies. They talk a lot about redundancy and backhauls. Take Toyota in Georgetown, for example. They don't just have one broadband provider. They have multiple pathways in case something drops, right? They don't shut down an assembly line that costs, hundreds of $1,000s per minute.
Yeah.
So, even if Starlink becomes part of that equation, it doesn't mean that fiber to the home is going to be completely outdated.
For sure.
Right? But I'm all for getting people like Elon Musk in the room to solve a problem that plagues Eastern Kentucky,
right.
And sees that it's important. I just think, I don't know the timeline of what that looks like. I don't think we had that much time to wait around and wait for it.
Well, the way I like to think of it is like Swiss cheese, layering on Swiss cheese. You got holes in the Swiss cheese, and maybe broadband still has a couple holes in it, and then you layer on Starlink, and that covers up most of the holes. And then the more you invest into this broadband throughout the state, you're going to finally get it to where there's that blanket that we were talking about, which is so important. So moving on from broadband, that's obviously one of the most important. I'm going to let you decide where you want to take it from there in terms of the next stop on the
put
blueprint.
Me on the spot, huh?
Yeah, I'll let you have the conversation. Take where you want. This is your platform.
Well, I would love to talk a little bit about the opportunity. Well, one, and this kind of leads into talking about tourism, but I think in Eastern Kentucky, probably the number one problem, and really it's not just Eastern Kentucky, it's probably to an extent Kentucky, but definitely Eastern Kentucky and Appalachian Kentucky. It's just perception. And when I think about like what SOAR should be completely focused on at the highest level, as far as what our mission should be, nothing more important than being the number one promoter, cheerleader, advocate for all things Eastern Kentucky and Appalachian Kentucky. The same way that you've talked with some of your guests, Jonathan Webb and the team at App Harvest, the folks at New Frontier, all these people that are making Eastern Kentucky swaggy, making it a great place to be, because it's the truth.
Yeah.
And doing and taking control of that narrative. That is the number one thing that we have to do a better job of moving forward, because what happens is when folks from our area don't tell that story, somebody else does. And usually it's somebody from outside the region. And when they tell that story, what they do is they tell it in a way that benefits whatever narrative they're trying to put or whatever is best in their interests. And most of the time that means that Eastern Kentucky is not, shine in a positive light. And listen, that doesn't mean that we run away. We have problems that we need to solve and things aren't great, but that doesn't mean that those should always take front and center from the good stuff that's happening. So, I think that's at the top of, SOAR's core responsibilities, and what should drive everything we do should be in that lens. And also, connecting the dots. Again, there's a lot of counties in Kentucky, 120, right? Our SOAR region has 54. All of those counties and cities and communities want to get better, want to improve, want to develop, want to offer their folks more opportunities, want their citizens to be healthy, want their people to be trained, want to have great education. But their mandate is for just their city itself or their community itself or their county itself. So nobody is really looking at the high level picture of what does it look like to promote and advance our region as a whole. So when I say connecting the dots, right, we're unique in that we're situated. Our mandate was to look out for all of Eastern Kentucky. So when you think about education, or when you think about tourism, or when you think about broadband, how can we be the team that's ultimately connecting what Williamsburg's doing with Somerset, or what Somerset's doing with Stanton and Powell County? One, making sure that nobody's working against each other, but also always making the case for why when we work together and cooperate and promote our region as a whole, why that's going to benefit you more than if you were doing it alone. Again, proving the ROI, right? And so that perception battle and connecting the dots, we have a great opportunity right now in tourism, which is part of our blueprint. And as I've gotten started in this job and I've went out into the region, everybody wants to talk about tourism for good reason, right? If you look at the trends that COVID has brought and how people entertain and relax and unplug, it plays right into the Eastern Kentucky Appalachian region, the types of tourism.
Big time.
The Red River Gorge right now is so full. It's crazy, right? Lake Cumberland, 4 million people a year, which is nuts to think about. There's so many anchor spots in all the outdoor recreation, ATVs, rock climbing, kayaking, yurting, all the things that people can do. That's all that we have to offer, right? And so we have such an opportunity to seize, and it shoots down. You kill so many birds with one stone if you get tourism, right? Because it's an economic driver directly, right? You bring people into your region, they spend money, you circulate in the economy, you give local businesses, local restaurants, local shops the opportunity, you put more customers directly in their door, which is super, super important, right? But it helps perception, because guess what? When you bring people from outside our region, heck, even in Kentucky, right, to Eastern Kentucky to see some things that they never even saw, changes their mind about what they think of when they first think of Eastern Kentucky. And then guess what? More than likely, they're going to interact with folks from Eastern Kentucky and from Appalachia. It's crazy how quickly people become just rabid fans. I talked to somebody yesterday. He's a healthcare hospital CEO in Eastern Kentucky, and he had moved here about 18 months ago from Louisiana. It was crazy hearing his transformation of coming here and talking about it's a hidden gem. I want to retire here. When I recruit physicians, it's so easy because once I bring them here, it's a no-brainer, and their families. Tourism does that. And the hard part's done for us. The hard part is the millions of years that it takes to actually form mountains and hills and rivers. And that's the hard part. We're blessed with that. Now we just have to get the right people in the right room to put the right plan together on the tourism front. But, I just think I grew up in, you're from small town Kentucky area. There's nothing to do. There's literally so much to do that it's crazy, and so many things to see. We have to tell people what to do.
Yeah, and to that point, what are you guys putting in place? Because, perception and attracting tourism, ultimately that comes back to some form of media. So is that being discussed? That's kind of what, at a micro level that we're trying to do with Middle Tech is like there's all these hidden gems and startups around here.
Yeah.
So how are you guys, talking about solving that perception and letting those, hidden gems be known around Kentucky, like you said, but also outside of Kentucky? What's being discussed?
Yeah, any type of strategic. You've just got to show up first and start talking about it, which is what we're doing here today. And I think you guys have again, seeing the growth and the what you guys have been able to do. I mean, it's been inspiring. And I think on tourism, that's the same thing. Is one, I think you have to put together all the assets that you have and kind of group them in similar groups and think about how you want to promote them, right? You know, at our summit, our virtual summit this year, we had one of our core pieces of content was a video blogging or a video series where we worked with a group called the Holler Creative out of Corbin, and they went around certain, the Gorge Underground and a few other sites, and they just kind of, it was really authentic. I think the marketing theme of 2020 was authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
You think about, I think about the ocean spray guy, right? Yeah. Just the real live clip of, doesn't even have to say anything, just people just feel it. And I think our videos did that at the summit, but you know what was missing, I think, and I think where the follow-up can be this year is putting together physical things where you string together how people can spend more than one day in Eastern Kentucky. And so, you know, crafting specific packages for if you want to kayak, or if you want to camp, or if you want to go riding four-wheelers, which is a big deal, or if you want to have family-oriented activities, and try to start at those anchor points, right? I mean, again, 4 million people to Lake Cumberland, a bunch of people to the Red River Gorge. I don't know if you guys knew this. Did you know, like, Eastern Kentucky has, I think, outside of maybe somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, has the largest elk population?
I had no idea we even had elk here.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy. And there's some good work on some sites that are going on that's going to be a massive win. So I think where you start is you get an idea of how you want to group things together. And then our role in that is, you know, we want to bring all the players together that are working on this kind of in the same room to talk about why working together and why we promote these, you know, in a cooperative way. Our messaging needs to be the same. It needs to be consistent. And so, you know, we're doing a lot of work online ourselves, you know, getting a little bit more organized from a website standpoint, kind of putting everything under one central location. You know, making sure that our email marketing lists are up to date, and we're doing a good job on social media of getting important information out, you know, quickly, effectively in front of the right people, right? And constantly with the same messaging, which is, you know, something along the lines of, this is a great place to be. If you haven't been here, if you haven't visited here, you need to come see it for yourself. You won't regret it. We know you'll be back. It's got to be very positive. It's got to be very like almost like a no-brainer, right? And so, you know, we're going to do that by how our presence is and trying to have one consistent messaging and getting buy-in from the region. And that's why getting the right people in the right room that are working on it, you have to get that buy-in for it to really get legs.
One cool thing I've seen some cities do is they'll, you know, there's this influencer marketing movement, and they'll find somebody that is an influencer in the outdoor space, and they'll, you know, say, hey, we've got some free attractions. We'll pay for your attractions here. Come videotape it and then share it. I could see that working well, because you've got to have, you know, that's authenticity, and that's showing off, you know, what you're doing in a region. And, you know, that made me think, like, for elk, you know, I don't know anything about elk, but is that like a hunting attraction? It's
a preserve.
You ride them. You ride the elk.
Yeah, right.
It's a preserve. Yeah, it's the Appalachian Wildlife Foundation is the name of. You can go check it out, and it's kind of in the works. And elk are really big, I know that, but it's a preserve, but it's a big time attraction. And you know where it's situated, it's kind of right off of I-75, and it's getting people to get off 75 and go 25, I believe, is the road, into, you know, a different way. And actually what they see is in that area where that preserve is working on being, is that the road, a lot of people take that road anyway because it gets them down into, I think, on the way to Asheville and some other areas through there. So the traffic's already there, so it can become an anchor spot. So that's something to look out for. The cool part about, you mentioned influencers, we got a lot of great ones. I mean, you're looking at some influencers on your head right there. The New Frontier guys.
Yeah, for
sure. You know, Jonathan Webb's been a tremendous advocate for Eastern Kentucky. Think about the Country Music Highway guys. Howard Childers. You know, we've worked with Chris Stapleton's people. You know, he gives back to the region a lot. Sturgill Simpson. I mean, all those. We've got some great influencers, and there's no doubt. I mean, they're sons of Eastern Kentucky, right? And they do a lot for the region that people don't have any idea about, that they're there and active. So we've got the right influencers to be able to spread that message. And even if folks from Eastern Kentucky leave, they never forget about it. They're always thinking of ways, whether they're in Lexington, Louisville, across the country or the world, they're always looking for worthwhile projects to be able to come in and give back. And we're fortunate to have that, because that's not the same for everywhere. And we have a very loyal, passionate group of people that really want to see the region continue to thrive. And so that's a good idea.
Yeah. And back to, the marketing stuff, as far as your all's organization and just the government and Eastern Kentucky in general, when it comes to marketing, are you guys outsourcing that, or is there a team internally that's doing that? How do you guys allocate, resources towards marketing?
Yeah, well, that's one of, we have ecosystem partners that provide a lot of those digital marketing services, for example. So, I mentioned the Holler Creative, BitSource, which is a company in Pikeville, Mountaintop Media, S Media in London. I have business and innovation champions in 42 of our 54 counties, and part of their, is to support and I'm sure we'll talk about entrepreneurship, but some existing small business owners, people that are looking to own businesses, and when they have a need for digital marketing services, we want to be a connecting point, right? So, we have somebody on staff that does that work for us. Her name's Hannah. She's our digital marketing or digital media coordinator, right? But, also probably at a bigger level than that, we're working every day on the ground with small business owners that need that type of help, and try to source that capacity domestically, right? To keep those dollars in our region, give those businesses an opportunity to continue to thrive and to support. And we've been really successful doing that. And marketing and web presence, as you can imagine, is probably the number one referral that we make and the biggest need, because again, you're talking about some of the trends in pandemic. If you're a retail store, you have to be able to compete online and have some sort of e-commerce revenue stream, because if not, it's going to be really, really hard to survive.
Let's transition to entrepreneurship and some of the things you guys are doing. You mentioned it there, connecting them to these digital service providers, but talk about entrepreneurship in the region and what it looks like now and what you're hoping to augment and help going forward.
Yeah, well, it's a big piece of what we're doing and creating that ecosystem and support, but also do it in a way, just to be honest, where you're everybody can kind of talk the talk and say the big words, right? But is there really that type of activity that's going on? And we feel like there is in Eastern Kentucky. And, we're kind of like we're here in Awesome Inc. today. We're part of the Kentucky Innovation Network, and kind of the hub for Eastern Kentucky. And so that's what allows us to have the field reps kind of in the region, our business and innovation champions that kind of spread throughout that. But Eastern Kentucky is at a different place than I think Lexington and Louisville. Lexington and Louisville especially. You guys had the folks from Poplar on to talk about, and I work with Amplify, or I've spoken with Larry at Amplify, and he's at the place, they're at the place, they have a lot of businesses in the pipeline. They're at that stage where they're seeking funding, right? We have some of those too, but we're more at the lines where we're just trying to get that pipeline of entrepreneurs there, which is, it's hard to create that sort of network. And I think about that conversation you guys had with Alex Lazaro when he came on, and he talked about those three things from his book, like resources and risk. And I think those are two really important themes to talk about with respect to entrepreneurship. I think as a whole, we have to do a better job of disseminating the message, especially in schools, that just because you're born in Eastern Kentucky in an Eastern Kentucky county or an Appalachian Kentucky county doesn't mean that you're any less likely to have the next good idea.
For sure.
It just is. You think about what separates people on the coast is just from the moment that is seen, like it's drilled in their head that this is a real pathway. People do it all the time. We have to do a good job of, and that's hard. How do you measure that? It's hard to know, but you have to show up every day and do your best and ultimately try to measure it. But it's through things like this. It's through marketing yourself as, from a tourism standpoint, as a desirable area to get some buzz and momentum and get people excited. Again, where a lot of those dominoes, they kind of self-feed itself. And so I think, resources is one way, and that's what we've brought to the table in trying to build that ecosystem and provide resources for existing small business owners, folks that want to start a small business, understanding the resources that are around them, and some of our other ecosystem partners, right? Whether that's from a funding or workforce development, things like that. I also think risk is, an important concept to think about, because and talked about it on that episode, a risk for somebody, in the valley or the coast, like they've got other options, right? So it's easy, and you can kind of come in with the mindset of, I'm going to give it all, and I'm not going to fail. But, they know back of their minds that even if they do, they probably got another option. And, Eastern Kentucky is they don't have a whole lot to risk. There's a lot of folks that grow up and, there's just, if they risk something, it's everything. And so I think that's been something that's like maybe held up or kind of halted the growth there to think about, because there's just not been a lot of leeway to give there. And so, our efforts are kind of focused on trying to create that pipeline of entrepreneurs and working with the partners in our area. I know you guys are your season 4 sponsored by the folks at Land Betterment. And, I've had conversations with those guys there that are trying to be a part of that solution and putting really their money where their mouth is and making the right type of investments, so trying to make sure that we're all spinning around the same message, working together cooperatively to kind of create this. And then when we start to see the first signs of those seeds sprouting like we are, making sure we blanket those folks and resources and give them the best type of technical assistance so that we can get more success stories like App Harvest, right? Which, Jonathan's incredible, his team's incredible, but it just allows us to talk about how that's possible in our region. Again, social proof that it's happening. So that's kind of where we are in pitch competitions and just trying to generate some buzz around that this is a legitimate thing that you can do, especially now where, a house is more than just a house. It's also an office, doctor's office, everything. Yeah. And that's kind of where a lot of our efforts are focused on, if that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so ingrained in what we're trying to do here at Middle Tech. We spoke just last night. This is actually going to be the first episode of season 4. I guess the audience will have already listened to it by now, but talking to Space Tango, a company that is literally sending automated science experiments into space via SpaceX into the International Space Station, is happening in Lexington, Kentucky. Why are we not thinking that, why is everyone not talking about that?
Yeah.
And, that was the problem that Evan identified early on when he was at Fuji, and thankfully did. And, we've gotten to 4 seasons of this, and I think the market has kind of responded and said, yes, this is a needed thing. So the more we can talk to the listeners who are coming up in through high school and wondering, what's my career path? What am I going to be doing? It took me a while to understand that entrepreneurship and this kind of startups and technology path was a legitimate path.
Yeah.
The more you can kind of hammer that home and understand that you don't have to go and be the doctor, lawyer, that's definitely a great path. And there's people who are going to flourish in that for sure. But this path of entrepreneurship is one that cannot be discounted. It's one that we have to rep really hard here in Kentucky.
It's really hard because it takes generations to, ingrain entrepreneurship into a culture. It's a mindset thing. You can't just say, I want entrepreneurship to exist in Kentucky right now, and it's going to happen. There's got to be examples. There's got to be a whole ecosystem surrounding it. And ultimately, you just got to foster a mindset of what it means to be an entrepreneur so that people want to take that leap and take the risk that you mentioned. It just takes, it takes generations. It takes a number of strategic moves to ingrain that into a region. And the regions that are ahead of us, on the coast, it's been a lifestyle for them for, since the internet was started, and even, before then in a lot of ways. So it just takes a long time, and I think, we'll figure it out. But it's really hard. So it's applaud to you and anybody that's trying to solve that problem. We're trying to do it on a micro level, but anybody at a macro level, at a government level, I can't imagine how hard that would be, because it's a long term. Like you said, seeing results. The work you put in to foster entrepreneurship, you're not going to see results for a long time. Yeah. And that could be frustrating. I can imagine in your shoes.
Again, I've thought a lot about that. So, I take home with me is, what's the metrics behind the metric? We can talk about money raised. We can talk about, startups created, startups that exited, right? But there's going to be time on that. So how do you know, to get to those, how do you know you're moving the needle in the right way on a daily basis? And there's some things we can, again, the first step is always just showing up. I'm going to adhere it to the belief that, 80% of life is just showing up and giving your best. And, ultimately it comes down to the outcomes, but that you have to start there and just creating activity and buzz. And, that's where we are. And I also think too, that, entrepreneurs, I think there's a lot out there that wouldn't say they're an entrepreneur, but that are, obviously advanced technology, advanced manufacturing, Space Tango, aerospace, that's traditionally kind of connected with being an entrepreneur, but I would think about just anybody that's gone out on their own and taken an idea and ran with it and made a business out of it.
Well, if you got a retail store, it could be anything.
Yeah. I mean, so I think we have to broaden the base for, we're playing, it's different here, right, than what it looks like, in San Francisco. We're going to have different types of companies, but it takes the same basic business principles to get something going and making money and acquiring customers, no matter how you do it or in what industry.
Such an important point. Yes. All right. So let's take it into one of these last bullet points we're going to have time for here that's along the blueprint, and that's regional food systems. And I just want to get into that because we've mentioned it a couple of times, App Harvest, and how important of a project that is. So one, how is that achieved? Is it things like App Harvest, or is it going to take more of a collaborative effort outside of that? Talk a little bit about what SOAR's focus is in regards to building that regional food system.
Yeah, well, I think ag tech is a big, when I kind of think about, and SOAR is, not economic development in itself, but really trying to make sure that the EDOs, the economic development organizations in our region, are kind of working together, right, on kind of the same things. And I think about buckets. I think about the industries, right, that we don't even know are going to come, like the ones that we're not sure that there's going to be brand new industry. I think about emerging nascent industries like ag tech. And I also think about the current industries where there's slack, meaning there's jobs that are created, things like healthcare, where there's crazy demand where they can't hire enough nurses or respiratory therapists and things like that, which a lot of people don't understand in our region, is that job creation is important. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of opportunity that's out there in those types of sectors where you can go out and make a great living and benefit and live and be a productive member in Eastern Kentucky. And those jobs are there. We just don't have the right. But looking at ag tech, right, being a new base job driver or base industry in our region, it's really exciting. And Eastern Kentucky has been a food desert for a lot of different, just geography based, topography based. I mean, you can't do traditional agriculture really well in Eastern Kentucky because of the mountains. And as a result, that's why it's been hard. It's been hard to transport things in. Vegetables, produce, the food that really sustains life and makes people, keeps them healthy and at the top of their game. It's expensive in Eastern Kentucky. I mean, that's been a lot of the driver for why there's been unhealthy habits over there. Is you can talk to your blue in the face about how important it is to have a balanced diet and things like that. But when it comes down to it, if it's, 4x, 5x more expensive than food they can get and that's processed and things like that, or it can't happen even no matter how much you want it. And so, I think what Jonathan's doing, it solves a direct problem in Kentucky, but also, globally. I heard him talk about that, right? By 2050, you've got to feed, X more amount of people. We've got to find a different way to do it. And that stat he threw out on that podcast was crazy, that outside the United States, the next largest agricultural exporter in the world was the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. And so, I think COVID too has showed in supply chain, how important domestic supply chains are. Healthcare and PPE. I heard you guys talk about that with Handle Global, those guys over in Louisville. But also food.
A lot of it's controlling your own destiny.
Yeah.
A lot of what America has done, the past 20 years has been outsourcing it to other countries. And now what we're starting to realize is we want to own our own destiny. So we did it with oil, we did it with energy. We're going to have to do it with food. And there's a lot of other things that we're going to have to do to own our own future and our independence. And that's even at a regional level, just in Kentucky, we're going to have to do that. All different parts of the world are going to have to own their own.
But I mean, those resources, it's also been more than just about food or just about oil, right? That's been a diplomatic measure as well. But, App Harvest, right? If you can come and find a way to grow tomatoes or leafy greens in a way that's closer, you're much closer to Eastern Kentucky. Of course, that helps. That takes down the transport costs, right, to get it to market, and also does it in a way, I would imagine it's much more economically viable and sustainable and regenerative. I think as much as we can support App Harvest and controlled environmental agriculture like they talk about, that would help to alleviate. Because I tell you what, we haven't done too well with traditional agriculture, right, in solving that problem. And if this is the way to do it, and encourage it maybe on a micro level with folks that can go and grow a garden that way, which they do a lot of outreach into through shipping containers, right, at local schools, which is pretty cool. Absolutely. I think that's something that can kind of feed in and kind of check that piece of the blueprint off.
Yeah. And, we've talked about a lot of really inspirational things that are going on in Kentucky. I mean, I'm sitting here and it's like a lot of this is just gets me so fired up. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to feel the exact same way. They're going to feel really fired up and they're going to say, what can I do? How can I be a part of this? What are some ways that people listening can help? What if just off the top of your head, how can an average listener help out with what we're trying to accomplish here, with what you're trying to accomplish at SOAR?
Well, I would say, for anybody that's in the SOAR region or Eastern Kentucky, if you need something, if you have a question, if you're not sure where to go, we want to be thought of as the clearinghouse for all things Appalachia, Kentucky. Not because we're trying to take the credit or be everything to everybody, but we've really built the right support network and again, ecosystem of all the different partners. There's so many people that are doing great work in Eastern Kentucky, from all those things on the blueprint, workforce development, tourism, but it can get a little overwhelming for a normal person to try to put together whose piece of the pie and puzzle this is. So, if you're in our region, you need help. If you're a business owner, get connected with us, reach out to us. SOARinnovation.com is where we kind of talk about our group of field reps, our business innovation champions that are in the region. Make sure you know who that person is. I mean, and utilize them and leverage them. That's why they're there, right? And we have to make sure we bring them to you. But if you're in the area and you need help, go there. Start there. Also on there'safuture.com, there's a great way to look at the blueprint, to look at some of the work, the proof, the impact report that we have. There's a donate tab. We are a nonprofit. We're a 501c3, right? And so, ultimately we're also very conscious of the fact that every dollar and resource that we get, we have to make sure that we're taking that and applying it in the most effective way that's going to drive the most impact possible. And so, those are the places I would start, right? Is by thinking of us when there is a need if you're in the region, and then checking us out online to see about some of the things that you're doing. And if you have ideas around things that align with our blueprint, right? Reach out to us, because we're really, really passionate every day about making those things a reality and lifting our partners up too that are doing that work.
Yeah.
Because again, we don't care about who gets the credit. We're just in there trying to be a part of the solution. And we want the people that are really on the front lines doing it to have the platform that they need to reach the people that they need.
Absolutely. And I saw on your website, you guys have a way to I think it was called Become a Partner of SOAR, and you can do it on an individual basis. So go check that out. If you're listening to this and you want to find a way to get in touch, go and explore that website for sure. So to close us out here, we always like ending on a forward-looking statement. So let's do kind of a double forward-looking statement here. I want to hear the forward-looking statement on SOAR and then the forward-looking statement on this region to close us out.
Well, I think we'll start with the region. I think the forward-looking statement on the region is that our best days are yet to come, and we've had some good days. I mean, you're talking about the region that fueled the Industrial Revolution for the United States. People don't talk about that enough. I mean, because of coal, because of the power that we helped the United States generate, it fueled everything. It was the baseline. It was the energy source, right? And so that's where we were. We were critical to everything that was there. And as we look ahead for a region, right? Yeah, we're at a pivot point, and we've gotten to it. And there's people can say what they want to, but the idea that we've gotten through it, but surviving in itself is not enough anymore, right? We've got to find a way to continue to close the opportunity gap and to kind of rewrite the script and take control of that narrative of how we present ourselves externally to the rest of the country and the world, but also how we feel about ourselves. Because I think that's super important too, to think about when we allow somebody else to control the narrative, and that's what we listen to on a day-to-day basis, that seeps inside of us as well. So we have to believe that, right? And we have to say that over and over again and get people to buy in and lift up and elevate the success stories that we have as the region as a whole, and not see it as a zero-sum game. The fact that, hey, if good things are happening in Boyd County or Rowan County, right, or Menifee County or Rockcastle County, right, that doesn't mean that other counties outside of there are losing. We're all in this together, right? We have to be. We have to be. The combined population of kind of the SOAR service area is somewhere around like 750,000 people. Put that on the scope of any city. If we're working in an isolated ways, our impact can only go so far. We're going to get much more leverage if we come together. So I think for the region, that's kind of my forward-looking statement. And as for SOAR, it kind of falls right into that. I think we just want to be to do our part to be the regional organization that's driving that work forward.
Yeah.
Right. Because nobody else, has the mandate that we have, which is to be that source for the region. So we have to live that up every day, and we have to operate with urgency, and we have to operate with an immense source of pride. It's been kind of some pinch me moments. It's been a lot of work since I've started, but every day I feel like I get to wake up and put Eastern Kentucky on the back of, the front of my jersey. Right. And that's really cool to me, to be able to say that I'm part of this. I can't do it all on my own. I've got we've got a great team. SOAR can't do it all, but we're going to lift up and do our best that when there are those positive things that are happening, we're getting as much legs with it as we can to be a part of that narrative for the region that, dude, it's happening right now and it's going to continue to happen. So either get on the boat now or miss your chance to be a part of a really awesome revitalization story and changing story over the next, 10 to 20 years, whatever that looks like. So hopefully that was forward thinking. And
that was perfect,
enough.
Man.
So
thank you so much for coming in here and doing this and talking about all these great things going on in the great home state of Kentucky. We're super excited to have you in the position that you're in. Just your background and the way you speak about all these things and the energy you bring to it. We're just proud that you're in the position you're in. So thank you again for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I've had a lot of fun today.